thymus is actually the pacemaker of aging. It's what starts aging. It's what controls the speed of aging throughout your entire life. So I regrew my own thymus. You can cool anything you want, theoretically even an elephant, to very, very low temperatures. And essentially, if you can cryopreserve the brain, then you can offer people medical time travel. So if you have a fatal condition now of virtually any kind, and you can preserve your brain.
I'm here with Greg Fahy, who is an incredible person. You have done so much in the field
Thank you.
of longevity for so long.
Thank you.
Very much appreciate you taking the time to be here, because you could be anywhere talking to anybody, because everybody wants to talk to you.
Well, thank you very much. But it's a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, thank you. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in the longevity field and what your inspiration was to get into it?
Well, there's several things that led up to it. One of the things was that I read my first book on aging when I was in high school. And I also started a club in high school that was devoted to life extension. When I went to college, I taught a 4-credit course at UC Irvine on man's quest for immortality.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so I've been interested in it for a while. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. But basically, it's the obvious. Life is good, and we should have more of it, and we should enjoy it more.
Agreed.
Yes.
So, how did you, you went into a science field and you did work on the thymus and stuff. What made you decide to go that avenue as a specialized avenue, as opposed to any of the other ways you could have gone?
Well, there's a couple reasons for it. So one thing is that I've always, so when I made the transition from high school to college, I was advised by a scientist, a life extension scientist called Paul Siegel. And there were many theories of aging at the time, and Paul said things that inspired me. And I found that his words have been true ever since 1968 when this happened. So he said, people, sometimes say that aging is wear and tear and damage and all of that. He says, but this is biology that you're talking about. And very little happens in biology by accident, right?
Right.
Biology is a very well-controlled system. And so he thought of aging more like the tadpole turning into a frog or the chrysalis turning into a butterfly. It's just another stage of development. And everything that I've learned since 1968 supports that view, almost without exception.
Wow, okay.
And so I was looking for examples that would make this very concrete. So one of the things that you think of first is the menopause, because that's obviously a biologically controlled, programmed event. But the trouble is that it has limited repercussions for everything else. It's just sort of an example. But 1986, there was a paper that was published in PNAS showing that you could regrow the thymus. And that's really, really, really interesting, because the thymus is the first thing that changes with age. And it turns out that the thymus controls lots of other downstream aging processes.
Okay.
So many people have thought, and there are very actually small number of people, have thought that the thymus is actually the pacemaker of aging. It's what starts aging. It's what controls the speed of aging throughout your entire life. And of course, there's an interplay between the thymus and the hypothalamus, and that's a really interesting story by itself. But I realized that the thymus is the example of programmed aging. It might even be one of the central mechanisms of programmed aging. And so I thought, this is phenomenal. But the paper showed that you could regrow the thymus. And I thought, that's devastating. That's blockbuster, because we need an immune system. So I figured that, PNAS is a high-class journal. People pay attention to what's published there. So I figured everybody and their uncle would jump on that and do something about it. But no, as is typical in the field, at least at the time, it was totally ignored.
Wow.
So I was invited to write an editorial about interventive gerontology in 1981, and I called attention to this sort of sleeping giant, and nobody did anything about it. That was 5 years later. So 5 years after that, I realized nobody was ever going to do anything about this. I had to take matters into my own hands, so I regrew my own thymus. And then several years after that, about 6 years after that, I published that N is equal to 1 study. And that led to setting up a company to do something about thymus regeneration.
Okay.
But that's where it all came from.
So I don't know if this is a parallel thing, but I want to ask about it anyways. Because one of your big accolades that people always think of when they think of you is the work you did with in vitro IVF.
No, well, so that's very indirect. So
Indirect.
yes,
Okay.
it's indirect. So I'll explain that. So
Okay.
The other love, of my research life is cryobiology. So if the aging intervention side of things fails, what's your backup plan, right?
Okay.
And so that could be cryopreservation. But besides that, if you need a new heart or a liver, you're going to get a much better heart or a liver if you get a perfectly matched heart or a liver, and if you can receive that without rejecting it. So cryobiology is the key to that. Actually, the marriage between cryobiology and thymus biology is the answer to that.
Okay.
So I set out to cryopreserve whole organs. And in graduate school, I did some electron microscope studies of what organs look like in the frozen state. And the short answer is they don't look pretty. In fact, looking at a kidney in the frozen state, I had a hard time at first even figuring out what I was looking at because the structure is so different than a normal kidney. It was hard to piece it together at first. And then I saw a lot of things that might look okay when you thaw, but in reality probably are not very easily reversible. And I followed up later on with kidney work. I froze kidneys for a week at -30 and thawed them out, and then I perfused them and challenged them with a vasoconstrictor. And I saw that the vascular system could still vasoconstrict after a week at -30 degrees Celsius. So I thought, well, maybe I was wrong about all of this, or maybe -30 is enough that the ice crystals won't damage the tissue too much. So we got excited about that, and we did the same thing for dog kidneys, and we transplanted them at the Navy base on the other side of the street. And when they undid the clamps, the kidneys pinked up and started producing urine. Everything looked good for a few minutes, and then they started turning blue, and then they started turning purple, and then they started urinating whole blood.
Ooh.
And so we knew that ice crystal damage was a real thing.
Okay.
So this is a long-winded way of getting around to the point that I thought, is there any way that we can preserve these complex structures without ice damage? And through a roundabout series of experiments, I came up with this idea of vitrification, which was an outlandish idea at the time because it means you have to replace so much water in the cell with cryoprotective agent that it's hard to imagine the cell ever surviving that experience. But if you can do that, then you can cool anything you want, theoretically even an elephant, to very, very low temperatures and never form an ice crystal. And if you don't form an ice crystal, then you don't have all of those problems that are attendant to ice crystal formation. You have one problem. So I would rather exchange the whole host of ice damage problems with one problem, cryoprotectant toxicity. So I've been working the rest of my life dealing with cryoprotectant toxicity. We have a lot of exciting advances that we've made over the years. We did transplant a kidney a couple years ago that still survived until this year. It was alive for a couple of years. It's a rabbit kidney, the biggest surviving vitrified organ in history, longest survival time for a vitrified organ in history. But we still have a lot of work to do to pretty it up and make it better.
Wow. Okay.
But that led, so the proof of principle of vitrification, I had these great ideas. I presented them at meetings. I published a great paper in 1984, but we didn't have any proof of principle. So a buddy of mine, another young cryobiologist, heard me talk about it and realized that when you freeze embryos, they actually don't freeze. So essentially, ice forms outside the embryo, and that causes water to flow out of the embryo onto the ice. So the embryo shrinks and it doesn't freeze inside. And he was able to show this in a series of elegant studies, which I just summarized in an article, a review article in Cryobiology. But anyway, that showed that you could vitrify mouse embryos. You can cool them at any cooling rate you want. Doesn't make any difference as long as you warm them quickly. That's a very novel observation. And we published it in Nature in 1985. And it was so impressive to some people that there was an unsigned editorial in The Lancet, which is a major, major journal, praising the work and saying it was a groundbreaking thing. And so this was rapidly adopted by the reproductive biology community and the reproductive cryobiology community, and it transformed embryo cryopreservation and then later egg cell preservation, which helped IVF. So that's a long-winded way of getting to your point. So yeah, recently somebody was joking with me. They said, well, Khloe Kardashian just had a baby through IVF, and you could say that Greg is the daddy baby, the baby daddy of that.
That's funny.
Right, because he enabled the whole thing to happen. So yeah, I have had big impact broadly in cryobiology and cryomedicine because vitrification is a universal thing. You can apply it to anything. If you if you twiddle the knobs in the right direction.
Okay.
So there's also a huge literature in using vitrification to preserve plants, of all things. And so that's a huge thing for agriculture too. So yeah, this idea that, I wanted to preserve organs has led to spin-off benefits in many, many different areas.
Okay. And so this whole thing of cryotechnology and vitrification, that's a parallel love for you
It
to
is.
the thymus research you're doing.
Yeah. So
How do you balance both of those?
yeah, the way I balance both of those is I have no life.
So no balance.
Yeah, no, yeah. So I sometimes say I preserve organs by day and I reverse aging by night, and on
like
the
it.
weekends, et cetera, and on vacations and stuff like that. So yeah, so I just work real hard at both of them, and they're both difficult problems, but of course I love them because they're what I want to do. So being able to do both of them at the same time is really great as far as I'm concerned. But it is difficult. Yeah, it's very
Okay.
difficult.
So taking each one of those individually, I'm going to ask the one question, but individually here. What do you see as the biggest challenge that you run into that slows down your progress, particularly with the thalamus that could reverse aging, and then the plan B with the
Yeah,
cryo?
yeah. So the biggest problem is really cash availability. We have tremendous ideas. We have blockbuster ideas, game-changing, world-changing ideas, I think, but we have no money.
Okay.
And the problem with that is that we're not taking a conventional. We have not been up to this point taking a conventional drug discovery approach, and the venture people like to have a patentable molecule, and we have a patentable process. But the concern is that people might try to bootleg it. There are answers to that, but it's just not a conventional pathway. So we are developing more conventional pharmaceuticals now to try to overcome those objections. We're developing a knockoff version of growth hormone. So I can go into detail about that, but it's a way of making a quick $1 billion without being very creative.
Okay.
So to me, if you can make $1 billion doing a thing that can't fail, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
It brings in the money that you can then use to do other things,
put it
right?
back
Exactly. More
into-
creative things,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
But we also have a way of stabilizing growth hormone. So even if we never sell any growth hormone, if we can sell the stabilization technology to the people who make it now, we could get a piece of that action indirectly.
Okay.
Yeah, so it protects growth hormone from stresses that otherwise would kill it off. So if you can travel with it without having to take an ice pack with you, or you can accidentally, ship it to Aunt Matilda in the winter and it freezes, but it doesn't care, those are things that might add value to the product.
Right.
It might
okay.
even extend its lifespan, so you don't have to buy it after it expires, So
Okay.
anyway, those are little silly things that we're doing that might bring in a lot of bucks. But the other thing that we're doing is we're on the trail of some really novel biology, a molecule that we're still characterizing in more detail that seems to allow plasma phenoage. That's what I call the Morgan-Levine aging clock. It's based on things that you can measure cheaply in blood plasma. So we have this thing that will send plasma phenoage in reverse in men of broad age ranges, and at least in elderly women, if not in young ones. And it also stimulates thymus growth, apparently, based on some very preliminary data that we just got 2 days ago.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, so we have this little test bed in which we can evaluate different molecules for their ability to regrow the thymus, just based on this in vitro model that we have. And this stuff just knocked our socks off. It's actually better than IGF-1, and IGF-1 is what's been regrowing the thymus in our patients, our volunteers. They're not patients because they're not sick, but our volunteers. So if we can use that as an alternative to growth hormone, or more likely as an adjunct to growth hormone to make it work better, we may have some really hot technology. And then there's some sleeper aspects to that I can't go into now, that could parlay that into something, just a whole new concept in pharmaceuticals. But I can't tell you about that right now.
Understood.
Yeah, but none of this is going anywhere right now at any speed because we have no money. So it's a chicken and egg situation. The venture people haven't put money into us because we don't have a novel molecule. If we had the money, we could develop a novel molecule, but we don't have the money to do it. So we're kind of looking for other ways of taking care of ourselves. We're going to put out some immune assays that we think people will want to buy, and that will bring in some revenue for the company. And we're going to actually be starting to ramp up our clinical operations, so we can actually theoretically make a little bit of money on clinical deployment of the technology. We're not allowed to do that on our clinical trials, but we can do that in other ways. And then we have a little bit of money that we got from X Prize Foundation recently, being
Oh,
named a
that's right. 'Cause you were,
semi-finalist in the
yes.
X. In the X.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you,
That's
thank you. It's a
amazing.
big deal.
Yeah.
There are over 600 teams competing for that, and they picked 40, and we were one of the 40. So yeah, we're pretty
Awesome.
excited about that.
Yeah.
And so we're working very, very hard to get a little bit more money, next April or so. So,
Okay.
so we have a bottleneck of money, but we'll survive until hopefully more money will come into our coffers next year.
Okay. You kind of answered the next question, which was going to be, what do you see as the solution to remove that
Yeah,
challenge? And so
right.
you're working on some ancillary things that could bring in some money to
That's
help
right.
fund the main research.
Exactly.
And then, of course, winning X Prize.
Yes, exactly. That would help a lot.
Yeah.
Right. So they say it's the $101 million X Prize Healthspan Foundation prize, but actually a lot of that money is spent on the developmental stages of that. So the person who wins the prize will get anywhere from 51 to 61 million, depending on whether you reverse aging by 10 years or 20 years.
Okay.
But that's okay. We'll settle for 51 million or
Okay.
61 million. That's okay.
Yeah.
We've already got data that takes you back more than 20 years in certain respects, but we need a lot more data.
Right.
Yeah.
And even, I'm sure, obviously, Liz Parrish, and I forget exactly how much age reversal she got from the therapy she was patient 0 with, but I think it was substantial. Like
It was
20 something.
substantial, but those were telomere years, not the global years.
Oh,
Right.
understood.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a different story.
Okay.
Yeah. But good, I wouldn't put it down.
Yeah,
Yeah, right,
right.
exactly.
All right. Well, is there anything you would like to tell the viewers that they could do to help themselves, or even better, something they could do to help you in your endeavors?
Yes, I really would. So there's a couple things. So there may be some things in cryobiology to talk about. And there are also some things in Thymus to talk about. So one of the things that we're really excited about is that there is a mouse that is able to regrow its thymus basically on command.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a transgenic mouse, and if you put the right drug into its drinking water, it will regrow the thymus at any age, even up to
Wow.
age 24 months. Half of the animals are dead at age 24 months, right? So if you can regrow the thymus at 24 months or 12 months or sometime in between, and keep it, you just keep feeding the drug to these animals in their drinking water until they die. Nobody knows how long they would live. But, I've created an argument that most people who die, actually most people who die, period, die of immune system failure after the age of 80, after the age of 60 or so. And so if that's true, or even partly a little bit true, if you prevent immune system failure in an animal model, they ought to live a lot longer. But we just need to find out. So we have to do some crowdfunding for that. And so that's where your audience might come in handy. When we set that up, maybe somebody can chip in a few bucks and we'll do that study. The mice are available to us. It's just nobody has done the experiment. You put them in a cage, you feed some of them water, you feed some of them water with the drug, and you see what happens.
Okay.
It's a real simple experiment. It won't cost that much. I don't have an exact budget, but we'll work out that very soon. And we'd love to get some support for that, because I think if we could do something radical, like double the lifespan of the mouse, that's going to make everybody wake up to the
Yes.
importance of the thymus and the importance of the immune system.
Okay.
So that would be game changing and benefit everybody on the planet, basically. So I hope some of your readers will help us with that.
Is there somewhere they can go if they do want to chip in and donate?
Yeah, that's a great thing. So they should contact me probably, or maybe just to prevent me from getting buried too deeply, maybe contact our trial coordinator, although she's going to get buried also, but that's okay. That's what we pay her for. So her name is Grace, Grace. And if people would write to grace@interveneimmune.com and just say something like mouse thymus study, then we'll get all the information back to everybody.
Grace@interveneimmune.com. We'll put a
Yes.
caption on the video.
Yeah,
for
that would be great.
All
Yeah,
right.
that would be great. Yeah.
All right. Well, Greg, do you
Yeah,
have
there's
something
one
else?
other thing.
Yeah.
So in the cryobiology realm, one of the ultimate endpoint of cryopreservation is to cryopreserve the brain, right? So if you can cryopreserve the brain, and there are obviously a few other details involved, but essentially, if you can cryopreserve the brain, then you can offer people medical time travel. So if you have a fatal condition now of virtually any kind, and you could preserve your brain until future technology catches up with that problem, then you could escape death in the here and now. Even though the method might be imperfect right now, if we develop certain technologies that are pretty well foreseen at this point, you may be able to reverse any imperfections in the preservation side of things now. So we're trying to show that memory can survive cryopreservation. And it's been demonstrated a few years ago that if you put brain cells into a dish, you can actually teach them how to fly an airplane.
Whoa.
And imagine if you take these brain cells down to cryogenic temperatures, you warm them back up, and you see if they can still fly the airplane. If they can, obviously memory's been preserved. Now we want to then scale up to a brain piece, a hippocampal slice, because that's where real memories are formed in real brains, and do the same experiment on them. And then if we can do that, then we'll go on to whole brains. But if we could get a little help with some of these intermediate stages, that would be great. So I would encourage your readers to contact CryoDAO and tell them to support our project, and maybe buy CryoDAO and see if the Greg Fahy Memory Project is something they might want to buy some tokens in.
Okay, so yeah, if anyone wants to help support that, please do. Greg is a hero on the front lines in that battle against aging and death. So he's one of the real deals. If you're going to support nobody but one person, he's one person to highly consider.
Thank you so much.
Greg, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. My pleasure. Take care.